it's time to begin our regular halacha shir. What I want to talk about today is the halachot governing deceiving someone, fooling someone, tricking someone. But before we come to that, let me ask you if you have any questions of a halachic nature that you would want to discuss.
I have one quick question, I hope.
Yes.
I have two. One is when women eat together with no men, mezuman is allowed, recommended,
Unthinkable.
or obligatory.
Well, you will not be surprised to hear that it's a machlokas poskim. I don't know how the men know that women do these things together, but I suppose it's a theoretical possibility that deserves discussion. That the machlokas amongst the poskim divide into two categories. Most poskim hold that women are rashai, permitted to engage in zimun just as men do. That's the majority view. The minority view is that of the Gra, the Gaon of Vilna, according to whom women are chayav, obligated to do this. So there are no poskim who prohibit it. The division of thinking amongst the poskim is large majority hold that it's permissible for women to do zimun just like men. The Gaon Vilna disagrees, and he says they're not permitted to do it, they're obligated to do it. In any event, it is a mitzvah. So of course, even according to the majority view, it's something to be encouraged, something to smile upon, something that's good.
And if there is a man at the table, is that appropriate?
Sure. Look, if you have three men and one woman, so the men do zimun and the woman responds. If you have three women and one man, it's exactly the same. Either the women hold like the Gra and they're obligated to say zimun, or they hold like the vast majority of poskim and they hold that it's permitted, but the women recite the zimun and the man responds.
Once the women begin a zimun, is the man now obligated to answer since he's present and heard it? Or
Yes. He has to answer. Okay.
And what does she say? What does she say if it's only women?
She can choose the nusach she wishes, just like a man can choose the nusach he wishes. A man can say Rabotai Nivarech. A man can say Miavelen Benchen in Yiddish. A man could say, let us recite grace after meals in English. A woman, if she wants to say in Yiddish, Miavelen Benchen, that's fine. If she wants to say Rabosai using the masculine form, that's a little bit strange, but that's okay if she wants to do it. It would be less strange if she would use a feminization, gevirotai, something like this, or haverotai, gevirotai. It would be less strange, but you can choose whatever nusach you want.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And also, just on the subject of benching, in benching at Melava Malka, Magdil or Migdal, and which Tehillim?
Oh dear, that's an embarrassing question. Let's go one point at a time. The difference between Migdal and Migdal, the two nuschaot, is all a mistake created by the printers of the Siddur. back in the days when everything was in handwritten manuscript, we saw in parentheses Beit Shin Aleph B'Shabbat Omrim Migdal. There are two different psukim, one in Yeshayahu, one in Malachim, two different psukim, and in Sograyim, in parentheses, in the manuscripts, it said Beit Shin Aleph B'Shabbat Omrim. That's what the printers thought it meant, but of course what it really meant was Beit Shin Aleph B'Shmuel Aleph. The text is Migdal. Since the printers made that mistake, it's become common to switch the nusach between Shabbat and Chol. Melava Malka is already after Shabbat, and then one uses the weekday. One uses the weekday version. That's the common practice, but I'm trying to emphasize that it really doesn't matter. There are just two psukim, and it's only the printers in recent times who've divided the two nuschaot between Shabbos and Chol. As far as what parak of Tehillim to say at the beginning, Al Naharot Bavel or Shir HaMa'alot, the common minhag is to say Shir HaMa'alot. Certain groups of Hasidim say Shir HaMa'alot at every Suda all year long, except during the 9 days when they say Al Naharot Bavel. Given a suffix, given reasons to say Al Naharot and Shir HaMa'alot always wins. As far as the Halacha is concerned, Birkat HaMazon should be recited after Divrei Torah. And the reason we have a parak of Tehillim is so that Birkat HaMazon will follow Divrei Torah. And therefore, as far as the halacha is concerned, it really doesn't matter what the Divrei Torah are before Birkat HaMazon. And then it's been minhagim about what to actually do. Now, there are communities which have other Divrei Torah. They're altogether different. Can you handle a bit of history? Oh, it's so terribly embarrassing. But here comes some history. It says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Shlosha she'achlu b'yachad v'lo amru divrei Torah. People who do not say divrei Torah prior to Birkat HaMazon, Ke'ilu zavchu zivchei meitim. It's as though they have offered a sacrifice to the dead. My, oh my, what on earth was Chazal talking about? Sacrifices to the dead just because you don't say divrei Torah? And what are the, whoever gave sacrifices to the dead? Well, here's a chapter in history. There was a very big city called Ugarit, which was a major commercial center from the times of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov through the times of Chazal. It was destroyed by the Romans and no longer stands, but it's been excavated. It's located near the Arab village of Ras Shamra, which is in Syria, just over the Syrian border. In any event, this town of Ugarit was a major commercial center for centuries and centuries, and their language, Ugaritic, happens to be almost identical with Biblical Hebrew. Anyone who knows Biblical Hebrew has no difficulty in reading Ugaritic texts. Well, they had a different alphabet. They had a different alphabet. You have to change it into letters, which you're familiar with. But aside from the alphabet, it's really very, very similar to Biblical Hebrew. And indeed, they did us the favor in Ugarit, the Goyim in Ugarit, did us the favor of leaving us tons, literally tons, thousands and thousands of kilograms worth of clay tablets with writing on them. So we have huge amounts of Ugaritic literature. commercial documents, religious poems, history, you name it, tons. In fact, a lot of it has not even been read yet. They're quite literally tons, thousands of kilograms worth of these clay tablets, which have been found in Ugarit. And so the language being very similar to Biblical Hebrew, sheds a lot of light on the meaning of many Biblical Hebrew words. Words which in Biblical Hebrew, the meaning is not so clear. The same word probably occurs many times in Ugaritic literature, and from the context in Ugaritic literature, you can figure out exactly what the word means. I'll give you one example, and you'll understand how it works. It says in the verse in the Torah, in Sefer Tehillim, Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. If I forget you, Yerushalayim, may my right hand, I suppose, may my right hand forget? What on earth is the right hand supposed to forget? What did it know that it's supposed to forget? I mean, what memory is the right hand? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget. It's a difficult simile, a difficult verse to understand. In Ugaritic, the word shachach has two meanings. It frequently means to forget, but exactly the same word in Ugaritic poetry frequently means it's contemporary with David HaMelech, just a few kilometers away, just over the Syrian border. The word shachach in Ugaritic frequently has a second meaning, to wither. The blossom on a flower withers. Now the meaning of the verse is clear. If I forget you, Yerushalayim, may my right hand wither. Oh, and now it's a verse of poetry. It's the same word used in two different senses, and when you grasp the two different meanings of the word, now we have a beautiful poetic verse. Imeshkachef Yerushalayim, tishkach yemini, the same word used in two different meanings. Well, in any event, we know a lot about the Avodah Zarah of the town of Ugarit. Boy, we know a lot about it. And there are a lot of gods there. It was a major idolatrous center. And the principal goddess was a goddess by the name of Uzi. She was a black goddess, and incidentally, she lives to this very day. She was the single most popular goddess of idolatry in the ancient Near East through late antiquity, and indeed, she still lives today. Think, for example, of Mary Macaulay's studies of Black Madonnas in Polish nunneries. These are not Madonnas which are venerated. They venerate the Madonnas. The Madonnas are not made out of black material. They are painted black. The veneration of the Black Madonna is surely a remnant of the idolatry of Uzi, which is in the ancient Near East. It was really big, and continues to this very day. In any event, it says in the Hadith, if you read the Hadith, is the Lahavdil, the Muslim versions of Midrash. Like they also have a lot of stories, and the story is told in the Hadith of the attack on the Quba. The Quba was the shrine in Saudi that Muhammad attacked and conquered, and today it's pilgrimage for the Hajj for the Muslims. As the Muslim forces were beginning their attack on the shrine of the Quba in Saudi, a black lady ran out of the shrine, and following her, the shomer, the guard of the shrine, called out to her, Rosie, protect thyself. She was the black goddess of the shrine. Now, this Avodah Zarah was immensely popular, and the main element of the worship of Uzi in Ugarit and in more or less throughout the Near East was the funerary feast. The funerary feast worked approximately as follows. When someone died, all the friends and relatives and neighbors would gather around the corpse and have a feast, a funerary feast in honor of Uzi. The feasts were always attended by dogs. If you look in the pictures, there are many images on the Ugaritic tablets, and you see pictures of people reclining on couches, engaging in feasting, and there's almost always a dog in the picture. The dog is usually under the couch, but you see the dog in other places. Indeed, you frequently see pictures of the dog tied to a candlestick, a tall menorah, a candlestick. The way the funerary feast worked was at the proper moment when everyone had drunk sufficient amounts of wine. When the proper moment came and enough wine had been consumed, a signal was given to the dogs as they'd whack the dogs on the back. The dogs would get up running, knock over all the candles, and then the orgy would begin. That's the way.
I thought a fire would have been good enough.
No, it had to be an orgy. After all, and Chazal quite correctly point out that one of the foundations of idolatrous practice of Avodah Zarah is Gilui Arayos. The orgy was a fundamental element of the Avodah, Lahavdil. Well, Chachamenu, the Tanaim in the Mishnah said, if you eat a meal without Divrei Torah, the Ki'ilu Zavchu Zivchei Meitim. Since you don't want to imitate what they're doing in the funerary feasts of Ugarit, you have to say Divrei Torah before the end of the meal, so that it will not have the structure of a funerary feast. Shem Alos is good. Al Nacharot is good. Some say there's some communities, some North African communities which say Adon Olam. It's also common in some Indian Jewish communities say Adon Olam before Birkat Hamazon. As long as it's Divrei Torah, you're okay.
Are you talking about the Bnei Israel community that does that?
Yeah, of course they're divided. There are many different groups, but some of them do that, yes.
Wow. I was curious. First off, thanks for that history. That was very interesting because we do a lot of this without knowing necessarily. Unfortunately, until we meet you. So going all the way back to the Magdil Migdol, why would some people say Migdol and attach it to Shabbat? Yeah,
because in the Kitzvah Yad there are two psukim, Magdol and Migdol, and in parentheses it said Beit Shin Aleph, Bishmuel Aleph. It's the other text, and that was understood by the printers as meaning B'Shabbat Omrim.
but why would they say it? Well, meaning I thought the default was because Malava Malka is Davek or some like to Shabbat that you'd say Migdol.
No, it's Big Mach. It's supposed to look
I guess this really doesn't matter so much halachically, but I'm wondering.
No, it does.
Oh,
Shabbat ends with Havdalah. According to Rambam, what's coming up in this next week's parsha? According to Rambam, Havdalah and Kiddush are two halves of the same mitzvah. According to Rambam, the mitzvah is to mark off the beginning of Shabbat and the end of Shabbat. Kiddush in the beginning of Shabbat is the first half of the mitzvah. You haven't finished the mitzvah until you say Havdalah at the end. According to Rambam, Havdalah is a mitzvah d'oraisa. According to this, since women are obligated to say Kiddush, they're equally obligated, a Torah obligation, according to the Rambam, to say Havdalah, because it's an integral part of the mitzvah of Kiddush. That's the Rambam. The Ramban and the other poskim disagree. The other poskim hold that Havdalah is simply a mitzvah d'Rabbanan whose time happens to be Motzei Shabbat. And it's not connected with Kiddush at all, since it's a mitzvah saseh, whose time is Motzei Shabbat. According to the Ramban, women are exempt. Well, here we have a machlokas poskim. According to Rambam, women have a Torah obligation to recite Havdalah. According to Ramban, they're totally exempt. What should you do? Well, the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch says, to resolve this controversy, women should hear Havdalah recited by a man, then they'll be Yotzei, and they won't have to say it themselves and run the risk of a bracha levatala. Now the question, of course, arises, how is it possible for there to be here a bracha levatala? After all, we, Ashkenazim, and around half of the Sephardic poskim all hold that a woman who takes upon herself a mitzvat aseh shazman grama, like lulav or shofar, recites the bracha. Well, since we in general hold that women should recite brachot when they accept upon themselves a mitzvah that they're exempt from, so even according to the Ramban, there should be no problem of women reciting Havdalah. Why does the Ramah, the Shulchan Aruch, recommend that women hear from men? The answer to this question is not explained by the Mefarshim, and therefore you're very fortunate to have me explain to you the only possible explanation for this opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch. Here goes. Havdalah, well, there's some introductory psukim, but then is Borei Pri Hagafen, a few other brachas on Besamim and on the candle, and then the longer bracha of Havdalah. The question arises, there's a hefsek, an interruption between Borei Pri Hagafen and actually drinking the wine. You don't drink the wine until much later, until after the Besamim, after the candle, after the long bracha. Now, someone who is chayav to recite those brachot between Borei Pri Hagafen and drinking the wine, well, of course, that's what he should do. But what about the woman? According to the Ramban, the woman is exempt from Havdalah. If she chooses to do it, she's still not obligated to say those brachot between Borei Pri Hagafen and drinking the wine, and therefore the Ramah is choshesh. The Ramah is afraid that those brachot constitute a hefsek, an interruption between the bracha and the drinking, and therefore will be preferable for women to hear Havdalah recited by a man.
And if a woman were to do it, they wouldn't take Borei Pri Hagafen, move it to the end, say it after
No.
You'd say it in the same order and exactly as it is.
Yeah, the order has to be the same. The Gemara discusses the order of the brachot in detail. The conclusion is they have to be in that order.
Yeah, I figured I didn't just come up with a chiddush after thousands of years.
Okay. Any other issues for today? Then let's move on to Genevat Da'at. Double click. Voila. Genevat Da'at is the name of the topic, deceiving someone. Sefer Yereim by the great Rav of Metz in the 13th century. Metz in those days was in Germany. They've since moved it into France. He says, Gonev data briot, anyone who deceives a person, bria, creature, that means a creature of God, a person, anyone who deceives a person, the moment in a financial matter, have b'chlal moment, that's a financial sin, v'over alot tignov. You're guilty of gneva if you deceive someone in a financial matter. You trick someone into buying a product which is not worth the price that you're demanding. Well, that's geneva. You deceive someone, you fool someone by selling a product which is defective. That's geneva, because there's a financial element in this. Kedetanya, we learn in the Tosefta, Ma'aseh b'chulin, and the Tosefta is quoted in the Gemara, Shlosha ganavim hem. There are three categories of thief. Rishon shebekulam gonev dat abriot. The worst of them is the one who deceives his or her fellow man or fellow woman in financial matters. V'hamarbe b'tikrovet, another category of thief, another category of deceit, which is prohibited, is someone who continually offers gifts. Someone is constantly inveigling me, someone is constantly pushing gifts upon me. And the person who's pushing the gifts on me knows that I'm not going to accept them. Well, he's trying to ingratiate himself with me. He doesn't really want to give me any gifts. He knows I'm not going to accept them, and therefore he feels free to offer me lavish gifts just to ingratiate himself with me. Well, that's deceit, because he knows that I'm not going to accept the gifts. Similarly, if you try to convince someone to eat a meal, but you come, eat a meal, here, have a piece of cake, here, eat more. If you know that person is not going to eat, well, you're deceiving that person. You're falsely ingratiating yourself, making believe falsely that you're offering food when you know full well that it's not going to be accepted. In any event, according to the Sefer Yedayin, deceit is a Torah prohibition, whether or not it has to do with financial matters. If the deceit touches upon a financial matter, that's called geneva. But even if it's just a case of trying to lavishly offer gifts to someone you know will not accept them, well, that's also a kind of deceit. You're making believe falsely that you're willing to give gifts when you know it's not going to happen. And that's also a Torah prohibition, according to the Sefer Yedayin. Ritva, medieval Spain, quotes the Gemara. Shmuel said in the Gemara, Asur lignov et databriot. It's prohibited to deceive people. Afilu da'ato shel goy. It's equally prohibited to deceive a non-Jew. If you will say, Mahu tzrach lahavi Shmuel bazo, if you'll ask, why did Shmuel have to teach us this? Aha, Tanya, we already know. The Hedya explicitly, B'masnisin, it says in the Mishnah explicitly before Shmuel lived, Ein mochrim nevelot u'treifot l'nochrim mipnei shematayot. The Mishnah already taught us that it's prohibited to sell nevelot and treifot to a goy, because you are deceiving the goy. We already should have understood this principle before Shmuel came around and told us. Let's understand what it says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says it's prohibited to sell treifot and nevelot to a goy. The technical precise definition of treif and nevela is not like people use the words today. Today, people say treif when they mean anything prohibited. The precise technical meaning of treif is an animal which died for any reason aside from kosher shechita. An animal which just died from a disease, or an animal which was killed in an improper way, not through proper shechita, that's called a treifa. Treifa means the death occurred by some means other than proper shechita. And nevela, on the other hand, means that the shechita was correct, that the slaughtering was correct, but examination of the internal organs revealed some gross anatomical lesions. The animal was sick. The animal was so sick it would probably not survive whatever disease or diseases it was suffering from. That's nevela. So these are two categories of prohibited meat, either prohibited not because it's pork, not because it's a prohibited species, that's a separate prohibition. This is a kosher species, a cow, which is prohibited either due to improper shechita. Shochet might make a mistake, for example, the shechita might not have been correct. That's treifa. Internal examination of the organs might reveal that the animal is nevela, and you're not allowed to sell these animals to a goy because you deceive him. What does that mean? The goy will think that you're offering him kosher meat. The goy knows that kosher meat costs more than the meat that goyim buy, because there's more labor involved in the production of the meat. It's labor intensive according to halacha. The goy knows that it's more costly, and the goy will think, oh, my Jewish friend is honoring me by giving me some kosher meat. And that's not really what's happening here. What's really happening here is that the Jew is unloading some prohibited meat that he's not allowed to eat himself, so he might as well just give it to his non-Jewish acquaintance. That's deceit. Of course, this deceit could very easily be set aside if you announce clearly, this is treif meat. We are not allowed to eat it. Would you like it as a gift? Now, this deserves a little bit of a historical comment. Since we began today with history, let's continue with some more historical comments. The Shulchan Aruch says, the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Sephardi author of the Shulchan Aruch, says that if some prohibited food fell into a mixture, into a acholen, daisop, into some mixture, and it's not clear how much prohibited food fell in, the Shulchan Aruch says, let a goy, a non-Jew, who is a kefela, a non-Jewish professional cook, let the non-Jewish professional cook taste the food and ask him, do you detect the taste of milk in this chicken soup? Do you detect the prohibited element in this mixture? And if we're talking about a professional chef, someone whose sense of taste must be very good, that's his profession, being able to distinguish tastes. And if the goy says, I do not detect the taste of milk in this chicken soup, then it's mutter. Then the Jews are allowed to eat. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Ramah, the Ashkenaz posek, says, Anu, our team, the Ashkenaz team, we do not rely upon goyim tasting the food. Well, of course, I know what the source is of the Shulchan Aruch are. The Shulchan Aruch is just copying over passages in the Gemara, which speak not rarely about goyim tasting the food, a kefela, a non-Jewish chef, tasting the food to see whether or not the prohibited element is detectable. The Gemara talks about that a lot. The Shulchan Aruch just follows the Gemara. The Ramah, who says that the Ashkenazim do not rely upon the taste of a goy, the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch are at a loss to find any source. Right? The Ramah says what he says. Historians, however, are pretty clear on the issue. Historians are pretty sure they know why the Ramah says what he says. The Ramah, all the Ramah said was, the fact is, we do not rely upon non-Jewish chefs to taste the food to determine whether or not the prohibited element is detectable in the mixture. That's all the Ramah said. And the historical background of this, historians know, is fairly simple and straightforward. Back in those days, 17th century Poland, if you can put yourself back into early modernity, the goy who knew that the Jew did not want to eat the food, that's why the Jew was asking the goy to taste it, the goy assumed that the reason the Jew did not wish to taste the food was because there was a curse on the food. Well, if there was a curse on the food, the guy also didn't want to eat it. And all the Ramah is doing is reporting to us that we here in 17th century Poland are unable to ask a non-Jewish chef to taste the food because they'll refuse to taste it unless they see that we taste it first. And we can't taste it first because we don't know yet whether or not the prohibited element has a detectable taste. That's the historical background of the Ramah. In any event, we already know from the Mishnah that one is prohibited from deceiving a goy, for example, by giving or selling treif meat without making it perfectly clear to the non-Jewish customer, this is meat which we're trying to unload because we cannot eat it. Yesh lomar, well, the Mishnah seems to be talking only about a case of selling the meat to the non-Jew. In the case of the Mishnah, the non-Jew is paying for the treif meat. That's a commercial situation where, of course, deceit is prohibited. But what if there's no money involved? What if it's only a gift? The Mishnah is not clear on that. That's why Shmuel had to speak up and say, even if there's no money involved, even if there's just a gift being given to a non-Jew, if there's any deceit implied in the gift, that's prohibited. Klamash Malan, we learn from Shmuel, the Af Bezel Asa Lignov Dasa Goy, you cannot deceive the Goy, surely not in financial matters, but Shmuel teaches us also not in matters which have no financial interest. Iso Genevis Da'ato Shal Nochri, Katvu Ketzat Rabotenu B'Shem Bali Etzesvis. The Ritva found this in the Tosfos somewhere. The Tosafot that we have, here's another historical point, because today is devoted largely to history. The Tosafot, which are printed on every page of the Gemara, were selected from a vast array of Tosafot. The typesetter for the first edition of the Gemara, Venice 1525, 1527, I don't remember the exact date, was the first printing of the Gemara, and the typesetter was Yaakov ben Chaim, was his name. Yaakov ben Chaim ibn Adoniyahu Ish Tunis. I like that for a name. Yaakov ben Chaim ibn Adoniyahu Ish Tunis. That was his name. He had before him a vast array of manuscripts of Tosafot, and he selected which Tosafot to print on the page. and to this very day. Those are the Tosafot which appear on the page. Many of the other Tosafot have subsequently been printed in different books. You buy a whole shelf of books of different manuscripts, Tosafot, which have been discovered in different libraries and printed in book form. But this particular Tosafot, which the Ritva is referring to, I've not been able to find it. I don't think it's known to exist today. But apparently, the Tosafot agrees with this position. Hu isur Torah, it's a Torah prohibition coming from the verse lo tignovu, lo techachashu. The prohibition of deceiving even a goy comes from this verse, and it's therefore a Torah prohibition. Let's take a look at what the Rambam teaches us. Asur lignov dat habriot, afilu dat hanochri, prohibited to deceive anyone, even a non-Jew. Ketzad, what would be an example of this? Lo yimkor l'nochri basar nevela b'makom basar shchuta. It's prohibited to sell to a non-Jew treif meat, leading the non-Jew to believe that you're selling kosher meat. Notice he's talking here about lo yimkor, a financial deceit. Even though the financial deceit should mean nothing to the non-Jew, even though there's no reason why the non-Jew should be concerned in the slightest about this financial deceit, still it's prohibited. You have to tell the truth, even in cases where the person you're deceiving, you judge that the person you're deceiving should not care about the deceit. It's still prohibited. Lo min al shel meita b'makom na'al shel zchuta. If you're selling shoes, you can't deceive the customer about the kind of leather that's in the shoe. You can't, even though the deceit has nothing to do with the price of the shoe, even though the price will be exactly the same, whether it's camel leather or yak leather, even though there's no reason why anyone should care one way or another whether the leather comes from a yak or from a camel, deceiving the customer is prohibited. You have to tell the truth. All of this is in financial matters, lo yimkor, when you're selling. Further, lo yisarev b'chavero sheyochal etzlo, even just trying to convince someone to eat a meal with you, even just imposing food on someone, no financial interest in this. You're just inviting someone to have some more food to eat, who yodea she'eino ochel, and you know that the person is not going to accept the food. That's prohibited. Lo yarbelo tikrovis hu yodea she'eino mikabel. You should not continually offer gifts to the person when you know that that person will not accept the gifts. Lo yiftach lo chaviot shehu tzarich lefotchan lemochran. If the customer comes in for a measure of wine, a customer comes into your wine store, and you tell the customer, you ask the customer, what would you like? And the customer says, I want a liter of red wine. And the last of the red wine had just been drained out of a barrel. Now you have to open up a new barrel for this customer. Well, deceiving the customer and saying something like, oh, I'll open up a new barrel just for you, when you have to open it up anyway because you're going to be needing it later. But saying even a simple deceit like this, oh, for you, I'll open up a new barrel of wine. Well, that is like that's a deceit. It's as though you are honoring the customer when in fact you're just doing what you have to do anyway. Examples could be multiplied endlessly.
Is that deoraita or is that the Rabbanan? I hope it's the Rabbanan.
Most poskim understand the Rambam as being the Rabbanan. If I give you one more example.
It happens too often in the shuk. Please go ahead.
Doesn't have to be in the shuk. Imagine that you're in a neighborhood where you do not normally go. I have a doctor's appointment in some outlying neighborhood where I don't usually go. I go to the doctor's appointment. And after the doctor's appointment, I said, I have a friend in this neighborhood. Let me go visit my friend. And I knock on the door and I say, I've come to visit you here. And oh, you came all the way here to visit me. Wonderful. Come in. I so much enjoy your company. Really? You came because you had a doctor's appointment in that neighborhood. Well, this is also a deceit. You're garnering. You're trying to get honor. You're making believe that you're honoring your friend by having come a long distance to visit him or her, and really you just had to be there for other reasons. Well, what you have to say is, no, I had to be in this neighborhood anyway, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to come and visit. You have to be truthful. That's what the Rambam says in Hilchot Deot. And the reason most poskim think that Rambam's opinion is the Rabbanan and not the Raisa is because most of the halachot in Hilchot Deot are the Rabbanan. But he also says in Hilchot Mechira, where things are more deraisa, he also says, Asur leramot et bnei adam, it is prohibited to defraud people, when buying and selling. It's prohibited to defraud people, or lignov datam, or to deceive them. Fraud is prohibited, deceit is prohibited. The ahad oved kachavim doesn't matter whether you're dealing with an idolater, ahad Yisrael, doesn't matter whether it's a Jew, shavim b'davar zeh, they're equal. They have to be treated equally. If you know there's a defect in the item you are selling, you have to tell the customer. You have to tell the customer there's a defect here. And even if there's no money involved, it's prohibited to deceive people. Okay, well, we're just seeing over and over again how severe this whole matter is. The Sefer Me'ir Eseinayim, which is one of the two principal commentaries on the Choshen Mishpat section of the Shulchan Aruch, says, Im yesh b'mimkaro mum, if there's a defect in the product you are selling, af al pi she'ein bo onas mamon, even though the defect will not lower the price. Some defects should affect the price of the product. Other defects are so minor or irrelevant that they do not affect the price of the product, even if the price is not affected, and therefore there's no financial interest in deceit. Makom haya lo lahodia, you still have to inform the customer. After all, the seller knows that most customers would not care at all about this defect, and the price would be the same. But someone out there might be wanting to use the product in an unusual way, and this defect is going to be important for that customer. Well, even though I'm not going to lower the price because of this defect, because I'll find plenty of customers who want to pay the full price despite the defect, still, you have to tell the customer, because maybe the customer might refuse to buy that product because the purpose that the customer wants will not be suited with the defect. Even though there's no financial interest here, it's still prohibited. Let's go one step further. Tzitz Eliezer says, Pashat, it's obvious. Although all the examples in the Mishnah although all the examples in the Gemara and the Rishonim that we just went through all the examples, although they all have to do with speaking, it's a davar pashut. It's obvious that it's equally prohibited to deceive someone in writing. Just like sheker, lying, is equally prohibited, whether it's oral or written. Zil basatama, it all depends on the reason. It doesn't matter how you communicate, it's the reason that you're communicating which is important. Sof ma'anehu et habriot. Bottom line, if you deceive them through written documents, well, that's equal to deceiving them by speech, and therefore prohibited. Libo lo taor, rucho lo nachon. You have an impure heart if you deceive someone through writing. Al yidei kein ma'amel v'chavot mikakea gidrei ha'emet misadei nafsho. Someone who deceives others is ruining his or her soul and uprooting all truth from within. Therefore, although there's a big machlokas poskim in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, and the poskim about when speech and writing are equivalent. For example, Kriya Shema must be recited by peh. Is it good enough to write the whole text of Kriya Shema? Oh, well, this is something which poskim discuss a long time. The conclusion is no. As far as Kriya Shema is concerned, it's speaking and not writing. There are other cases where writing is equivalent with speaking, and this is one of them, according to Tzitz Eliezer. The Sefer Miras Einayim that we just quoted before also says, Im yesh b'mim karomum, if there is a defect, you have to reveal it. Let's take a look at the Maharil, one of the great Ashkenaz Rishonim. Ein nachon l'shtamesh b'klei goyim hamemushkamim b'yad Yisrael. If the Jew lends money to the non-Jew, and back in the days of the Maharil, this was an important historical element of the Jewish economy back in those days. The Jews had been agrarian, living on farms. They had been farmers until all the lands were confiscated by the Goyim, and the Jews were forced to move into the cities. In the cities, the Goyim prohibited the Jews from pursuing most professions. They could not be. They were prohibited from being tanners. They were prohibited from being weavers. They were prohibited from being carpenters. They were prohibited from being bricklayers, and so forth and so on. One of the few livelihoods left for the Jew was the Goyim did not wish to lend money because, according to their theology, lending money is prohibited. That's usury. So let the Jews do it. Well, if the Jew would lend money to the non-Jew, he would want a mashkon, a deposit. Leave me some silver, jewelry, leave me some something valuable, and I'll return it to you. I'll return your property to me when you pay back the loan. That's a deposit. Well, the Maharil points out that it's prohibited for the Jew to use the deposited item imlo sheyitol reshus min hagoy, unless you explicitly ask the goy, you're leaving the gold jewelry with me until you repay the loan. Can my wife wear it meanwhile? Well, if you get permission, then it's okay. But without explicit permission, it's prohibited for the Jew to use the deposit. Stama makpideh, we assume in general that the goy is makpid, does not want the deposit to be used unless he explicitly permits it. And that's called gnei vastas, even though the deposit is not damaged in any way, even though the gold jewelry will be exactly the same when it's ultimately returned to the non-Jewish borrower, even though there's no financial element involved whatsoever in using the jewelry, still it's Gnevus Das because the Goy did not give his approval. Well, we've seen all the sources from the Talmudic days through the Rishonim. Now, let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch paskins Sar Ovikachavim, the local duke, the local prince, whatever the local non-Jewish administrator is, Shalach Mamon L'Yisrael Tzedakah. The non-Jewish prince sent money to the Jews for tzedakah. Here, this is for tzedakah for the Jews, for the poor Jews. Ein machzirim otam, mishum shlom machut. We do not return the money to the non-Jew, to the non-Jewish prince, because returning the money would be a slap in his face, and we want to maintain good relations between the prince and the Jewish community. What do you do with the money? Ella, notlim imenu v'naten la'aniyei nachri b'seter. The Jewish community accepts the money and distributes it to poor goyim quietly. Kedei shelo yishma hasar, so that the Tsar, the prince, will not know that the money has been distributed to poor Gentiles rather than to poor Jews. The money was given for the Jewish community, and it's being diverted by the Jewish community to the non-Jewish poor. The Ramah therefore says, no, no, no. Ya'aseh behem ma shetziva hamoshel. You must do with the money exactly what the donor of the money intended. Since the non-Jewish prince intended the money to be used for the Jewish poor, you must use it for that purpose. Anything else would be deceit. I'll give you one more example, and you'll understand how the principle works. Everyone knows that there's a lovely minhag, praiseworthy, commendable, all kinds of good things. There's a wonderful minhag to give 1/10 of your income for tzedakah. It's not exactly the same as saying obligatory, but it is a very good minhag. Now, imagine, for example, you have a young couple starting out in life, and the parents-in-law, see that their children are having financial difficulty, just starting out in life, and the parents-in-law say, here's a few hundred shekels, 1,000 shekels, whatever, every month to help pay for your rent. And the young couple accepts the money to help pay for the rent. Or they say, here's a sum of money, go buy a couch, go buy a cabinet. The money was given for a specific purpose. Now the question arises, should 1/10 of that sum be taken off and given for tzedakah? And the answer is clearly no, absolutely not. Diverting some of that money from paying the rent and using it for tzedakah, diverting some of that money and not using it for what the donor intended, to buy a couch or whatever the donor intended, instead giving it to the poor, is an act of deceit. That's Gnevus Das. You're defrauding the donor, and that you're not allowed to do. Okay? So, with this, we come to the end of a survey of the principal sources regarding Gnevat Dat, deceit, and fraud. Do you have any questions that you wish to ask?
Yeah, can I ask a question, please? Do I need to check wool beret for shatnez?
Do you want have to check what for Shabbos?
Wool beret. Hat. Wool hat.
Beret.
Beret.
In general, not. No, the ordinary beret that they sell in the shuk today have no linen in them, no pishtan, only tzemer. They're okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What is the term for pig if not treif?
Well, what is the term for a pig?
Pig or something else if not treif?
In rabbinic terminology, it's just called isur achila. Sometimes the word tameh is used. Behema tme'ah.
Question.
Yes.
Why? Oh, I'm sorry. So why is there a fear that the community would use the money not for the Jewish community? Why would the community divert that to why would they need to divert it to non-Jews?
Well, the Gemara in the beginning of Baba Basra, first paragraph of Baba Basra, says flat out that Jews are not allowed to receive tzedakah from evil goyim, wicked goyim. The idea is as follows. A wicked person, an evil person, we do not want to do anything which is going to prolong the evil, which is going to prolong the wickedness of the wicked person. And by enabling the wicked person to get the zchut, the merit of giving tzedakah, well, that person is just going to receive spiritual strength, and the wickedness and the evil will continue. And therefore, one should not accept that money. Ma'aseh shehaya kach haya. The Binyan Zion was Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, 19th century Germany, was asked the following question. In his days, there was some kind of natural disaster, earthquake, flood. I don't know exactly what happened, but there was some shtetl, little village in Eastern Europe where the Jewish community suffered a disaster. There was a fire, an earthquake, so something happened, and they put advertisements in the Jewish newspapers in Germany, soliciting tzedakah funds to help this Jewish community in Eastern Europe get back on its feet, with a post office box to send in your checks. Well, among the checks that arrived were checks that were donated by non-Jewish donors. And the question arose, what to do with those checks? Well, you can't give them back to the donors because that would be like a slap in the face. And what we want is good relations with our neighbors, not bad relations. On the other hand, Baba Basra says, if it's a wicked person, an evil person who gave the money, it should not be distributed to the Jews. What should you do? Yaakov Ettlinger responded as follows. He said, in general, who knows about specific cases, but in general, there's a big difference between Jews who give tzedakah and goyim who give tzedakah. Jews who give tzedakah do so because it's a mitzvah. If the poor person knocks on the door of the Jew soliciting tzedakah, the Balabayit says, oh, I'm so happy you knocked on my door. If you had not, I would have to go out looking for you to give you the money. Here, it's a mitzvah. The goy, on the other hand, gives the tzedakah not because it's a mitzvah, but rather out of a sense of mercy and compassion. And nothing could be worse than that. But what's so bad about mercy and compassion? When the rich person gives the poor person tzedakah out of a sense of mercy and compassion, you are creating a situation of denigrating and embarrassing the poor person. And that's bad. Oh, very different than when the Jew gives tzedakah. Oh, it's a mitzvah. I'm happy you knocked on my door. If you hadn't, I would have had to go out and find you to do this mitzvah. And therefore, he held that the non-Jew who sent in the checks for the poor Jews in Eastern Europe were doing so probably out of a sense of mercy and compassion, which is not tzedakah at all, and therefore they don't get the zchut of a mitzvah.
So in other words,
even if they're evil, it's okay to take the money.
in other words, it creates a sense of subservience to the and the superiority to the giver.
Exactly. That's what's wrong with mercy and compassion. Okay.
Wow. I had a
yes.
I was curious if the offering, so let's say you're talking about offering food, and if you know for sure, in the example it sounded like if you know for sure they're not going to accept it, but you're offering them food just so you can feel like, oh, I like honored you, I offered you food even though I know you're not going to accept it. That's problematic. That's getting a bit
That's
bad.
fraud, right?
But if someone's not sure, even if they're mostly sure they're not going to take it, but you know what, maybe they really will, and you have a good feeling they won't, but like, is that already enough?
Then it's okay. Then it's okay to offer.
Oh, you have to, it's just only in a place of certainty that it's like, okay, if I'm certain, then I just avoid, because that's going to.
I know he's not going to take it, so I can really jack up the value of what I'm offering.
Wow. All right. And then and then this is kind of funny because it's quite on topic, but in reverse. Are they worried when they're asking the non-Jews to taste, that maybe they will taste the pork or milk and then report that they didn't?
No, the davar datuye litgule, a fact which is presently going to be revealed one way or another, is a reason for a non-Jew to have ne'emanut, trustworthiness. If the non-Jew knows that the truth of his statement or her statement is going to be revealed presently one way or another, so that's a good incentive not to lie.
But couldn't it be worth it for them to get the Jewish person to take one taste? But we don't hold that way. All right, I get it.
Could be. Okay.
Thank you.
Let me. I will leave you with one question to think about. You remember, it's the Ramah, the Ashkenaz posek, who said we do not rely upon the tasting of a non-Jewish chef. Reb Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch said we do rely upon it. Well, if a bit of further, what about the following case? A bit of pork juice fell into the chicken soup. Well, I can have a non-Jewish professional chef taste it. If he says, I cannot detect the taste of pork in this chicken soup, now a Sephardi can taste it. If the Sephardi then says, I do not taste the pork, now an Ashkenazi can eat it. Well, I leave you.
So what's the question?
Is that okay?
Well, it's kind of the same thing like a Sephardi putting the soup back on the plata.
Doesn't it sound a little bit? Well, I leave you to think about it. And you can share.
Well, what could be the problem if a Sephardi can has a pot that they cooked rice on Pesach? Why can't they cook your egg in it after it's clean?
Not so fast. Think about it more. Okay, we're going to pause with this today. I wish you a good week, a safe week. Shabbos. Look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Shabbos,